You said you were going to do all this. You were going to come up with the talking points.
Yeah, but
You didn't?
I didn't. Okay. Okay. Uncultured.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how you came across this book.
So I came across this book.
First, tell the audience who you are, because I didn't introduce you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Metalberg. I'm really into cults.
All right. Uncultured. How'd you find it?
I thought it was very interesting. So the reason that I actually told Andy to listen to this book or read this book was because I've been on a little bit of a cult kick. So I've been doing a lot of podcasts and books on different cults. A lot of them are very Christian fundamentalist focused cults. And I happen to be listening to a podcast, and the author, Daniella Young, her middle last name is
Mestyanek.
Yes. So she had an interview, and she was talking about how she grew up, and I was fascinated by her story. And she had brought up that she had written a book, and so I downloaded it on Audible, and I started listening to it, and I thought it was very, very fascinating. The different take on Christian fundamentalism is just fascinating. Like, it was a completely different area.
Tell me, what that is, Christian fundamentalism.
So, Christian fundamentalism is basically, in my perspective, in my opinion, it is living your life very, focused on Scripture. So, purity, a lot of it has to do with purity culture, except for, this one. But most of it's purity culture. Some of the other cults that come to mind right away is like the FDLS, the Mormon Church, or the Mormon Church is...
The Mormon Church is a cult.
It is a cult. And actually, the podcast that I found Daniella from was a person who was a part of the Mormon Church, and she left because of the cult mindset. So the Mormon Church, but then it is a example of more modern day cult. FDLS is the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. That is the plural marriage side of Mormonism. So they have multiple wives. So that and those wives, they can't have voices for themselves. They have lots and lots of babies. They have multiple sister wives. And
yeah, did you ever watch that show?
Yeah, Sister Wives. Yeah. I follow them religiously, weirdly enough, because it just fascinates me. They're all divorced now, though.
Really?
Yeah.
Even the OG wife? Because I thought she was in it forever.
Mary
Yeah.
had cheated on Cody a few years ago, and it was a big ordeal. Cody basically said he wasn't in a relationship with Mary anymore, but Mary didn't want to leave, so she didn't want to give up. But then Christine, which was his third wife, did leave because she decided that she wanted a man that loved her in her life, and she's now engaged. She's getting married this month. And then Janelle, who was the second wife, left, so now he just has one wife. Robin, which was the last one. She's kind of a bitch anyways.
Oh, the youngest one?
Yeah.
She's the one that stuck out? I figured she'd be the one that'd leave.
Well, she got all of, she came on the show, right, the first season.
They're huge. Yeah.
The first season was them marrying her. So with that situation, I mean, she came into money, right? The rest of them, were broke AF for most of their marriage. And then they have this hit TV show. She gets to marry, so then they get, lots and lots of money. Because I think he's got 21 kids or something, and none of them are paid. Cody gets all the money, and Robin was his favorite wife. So they,
Do you think it's because she was the youngest?
The youngest, probably also the newest. It's a shiny new toy, right? But according to the YouTube, gossipy channels, there's trouble in paradise between the two of them too. So Cody might not have any wives. So, but they are the AUB, and they're the AUB, and I can never pronounce that one right. But the AUB is very similar to the FDLS.
So it's not a cult though.
It is a cult.
Oh, okay.
It is still a cult. And then if you know, like, 19 Kids and Counting, or like the Duggar family.
Yeah.
So they are also.
Why do I know these people?
I don't know.
Anyways,
But
go on.
they also are like a part of a cult.
I just remember the dad always being like, "Buy used and save the difference," or whatever.
So there was a TV series that came out on Amazon Prime last month, I think, and it's Shiny Happy People. And Jill Duggar, who is the oldest or the second oldest girl of the clan, talks about how like messed up their family is and stuff. Super fascinating. I really like cults. I don't know if you could tell. I really like to learn about Christian fundamentalist cults. But what got me interested about Uncultured was the take. It's not purity culture. It's like the opposite, but it still has the same like nasty to it. Mm-hmm. It's like a sex cult, but still using it in like Jesus's name, which is like weird. It's a weird concept for me, because growing up the way that I did, and being babysat by Amish and stuff, the fundamentalist like purity culture is something that I was around. Like that's something that I grew up with. So having something completely different was super fascinating, and that is a big reason why I actually listened to the book instead of just listening to podcasts.
I did think that it was interesting to, like, I remember thinking about, I had a question, like, if there is a spectrum of wild, casual sex culture, and then on one side, and the other side is like Puritans, sex is almost like dirty.
Yeah, it's bad.
Right? You would think that anything to do with a Christianity would be somewhere leaning towards the dirty side. Mm-hmm. But this one is like totally full-blown hippie, love is free. Yeah. Let's do our thing.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, like hardcore with that cult.
All in Jesus' name.
And that's why it fascinated me so much, because I was like, this is... And you know what was super interesting after reading or listening to the book was that it's almost... Yes, they're complete opposites, but they're almost, like two sides of the same coin, like it's still yucky.
Yeah.
It, in my opinion, it's no different than the cults that have 12-year-old girls getting married, and but it's such a different spectrum.
Yeah, it's really odd, because you would think that, I always thought the purpose of religion was to like bring order, and in this culture, this cult is, by the way, the family, is very hedonistic in its sexual nature.
Yeah. I'm like, I think if it wasn't for the fact that they were, raping children, like if it was all consensual adults that were just, having a good old sexy time, it wouldn't like be so yucky, I think. But it was the fact that like they're sleeping with like little kids, In one point they like talk about sleeping with like toddlers, and that's ugh.
Yeah, okay, so this book, the author is a child that was born into this cult, and she's third generation, but like an eldest of the third generation, because her mother was 14 or something when she got pregnant.
She was the first baby born into that cult.
Her mom was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's why, Daniella was the first of the children, like because her mom was 14, Daniela was the first, like, where they had to worry about, the dads. Because her real dad was like 38 or something, and her mom was 14. And when they were at the hospital, and they were like, well, who's the dad? And that's when the rules started changing, where they couldn't like have sex with the kids up until they hit puberty, and then they couldn't have sex with them until 16.
16.
Yeah.
Age of consent.
Yeah.
Yep. And her dad was actually like, he was like famous within the cult. He was like a movie star because they made all their own movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And her grandfather was like the lead accountant.
Yeah.
Who didn't even like live with any of them. He lived in the palace, I guess. I remember one scene where she talks about how she got in trouble for some reason, and basically the gist I got was there'd be all these people living in this one house, bunch of dudes, bunch of chicks, bunch of kids, and if the kids were acting up, any guy could just take the lead and punish the kid. And she was taken down by like the monster guy of the group, the guy that all the kids knew was really evil. And she was taken down in the basement, which was like a recording studio. And he threw her in this room with like a mattress. It's just a rape room. And did his thing, and then like left her in there for hours and hours, so long that she like pissed the bed because she was afraid to leave the room and stuff.
Yeah. Then he came back and did his thing again and let her go. I think the part that was really interesting to me is that her mother like was different and wanted to be different, but like she still didn't know that Uncle Jerry was doing all that stuff. Or like maybe she didn't want to know.
I feel like these adults had to know what was going on.
I do too. Like the fact that they all are just like acting like they didn't understand that like children, like even in their doctrine they said that like you could sleep with the child up until they hit puberty.
Yeah.
That's just unethical, right? Like morally that's like wrong, right? Like inside of your person you see an innocent child. Why would you want to do that?
Well, and the images too that some guys didn't do it, but like the others did. I'm curious though if they would have still done it if it wasn't accepted within their culture. I also wonder if the fact that it was basically free reign to have sex with whoever, because even like the wives were all shared. Like you had your partner, but if a man approached you as a woman, you had to submit to him, which is interesting. And I almost wonder if that was how they got more men into the group. Like if that was one of the selling points.
Probably.
You can just bang whoever you want here.
Probably.
Including everybody's kids.
Well, because if you actually like listen to the unspoken lines, I guess it was majority women leaving. Men usually stayed. So like even her grandmother had left the cult.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, her grandmother had left because after, I think her mom was like 3 or something, and her I think her name was like Margarita or something was the grandmother's name, and Margarita had left the cult, and at that point, the accountant grandpa, like took Daniella's mom and just like disappeared to Europe, I do believe, and where Margarita couldn't get in touch with her child at all.
Just dropped her off. Just left her in Europe.
Well, no, they moved out. by where the prophet guy was.
Oh, yeah.
But they like completely left so that way Margarita couldn't. And I think that's when they left the United States. Like her family left the United States and started moving around after that point. But a lot of women left.
I didn't get that impression. I was just like, why are all these people staying here when it's so obviously like really toxic?
I think a lot of it was at a certain point, like most of them were born into it, and so that's all they knew. And when you're being told that like when you're born into a situation where you think that what your family's doing is right, even though like the rest of society is saying no, and they're telling you that they're like, you know, trying to take the kids away and they're trying to like take your faith away and all that stuff, they're creating a fear tactic. And I think that has a tendency to make people stay because they, one, don't know any better because they grew up in it. And, I mean, when you grow up in something, you have a really hard time having an opinion for yourself, especially if you haven't seen the outside world. If you've lived in a compound your whole life around other people who believe what you believe or what you've been taught to believe, it's really hard for you to step out of it. And I think, you know, a lot of people who join cults, they're searching for something, and then they raise their children in it, and then their children don't know that it's wrong.
Yeah, I think I know what they're looking for. They're looking for that idea of a community of people sharing resources together and like living that utopian dream.
And you know, it's so easy. It's so easy to end up in a cult. And as you know, I've been doing a lot of research on cults and whatnot, but I also love theology. It's one of my like favorite things to talk about. And I think when they're it's so easy to end up becoming obsessed with something. You know, they even say that like Disney is a cult in and of itself, you know, with all these like Disney adults, right? I don't know if you've heard of what those are, but they like dress up. So at the Disney parks, you're not allowed to dress up in costume, but you can dress up in outfits that could be considered character based. Okay. So these people will like go all out on their Disney costumes that they aren't, but they are real clothes, I guess. But Starbucks can be a cult for the people who like refuse to get anything but Starbucks. So it's really easy to find yourself in a cult, and like anything can be.
I feel like the Starbucks thing is more like a brand loyalty.
Sure.
What's the difference between that and?
It's the obsession, and it's the.
Like I guess I could be in the Sour Monkey V for Victory beer cult.
Sure.
Because if I see this beer, I'm probably gonna buy it.
This video is not sponsored. But I don't know. They're very interesting. It could become anything can become a cult real quick.
I'm really curious though. This author, she doesn't talk about it at all. Clearly, what this family is doing to the little girls is horrible. But she never discusses what they did with the little boys.
I noticed that too.
Other than that, every night the girls weren't allowed to wear underwear to bed, and occasionally, instead of an adult, they'd let one of the older boys do panty check, which like part of grooming them to dominate over girls. I imagine.
I think when she had that thing with David, a little bit more, you kind of got to see a little bit more of like the guys, but I think that really they just had harder discipline. Like they just got spanked a lot too. But I think that the girls in the community were the ones that kind of.
You think they took the brunt of the rape?
Yeah, but I'm sure that it happened to the boys too. Like I would love to hear like a perspective of the male side, because I'm sure it did happen.
Yeah. She just only focuses on herself.
Yes.
I'm disappointed in this author. Like, I wanted to know more about the family, and she doesn't really talk about enough of it. It's all just from her point of view, which I guess is understandable.
Because she's telling her story.
Yeah.
But she definitely doesn't go into
But there's no later in life reflection on what's going on. It's just she speaks of it from her child's perspective and then never gives clarity to it afterwards.
Mm-hmm. I really think that she needed to expand on that part of her life a lot more, and like and explain like a lot more, because it's only like half of the book.
Yeah.
And I think that because that part had such a big impact on the rest of the book, because obviously the way that she handles her life today even is a reflection of like not dealing with what happened when she was a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that it could have even like helped her and like freed herself by expanding on it more and actually educating people on the cult a little bit more instead of just her personal experience in the cult.
Also, one of the ways that the family was split up in these groups, and one of the ways these groups made money was that they'd have the kids go on the streets and beg for money or whatever, right? Or like read scripture, or some crazy stuff. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, so she's basically being groomed on a sales tactic, some kind of manipulation. And at the same time, she's also learning how to, more specifically when she gets older, like pubescent age, she's learning how to flirt, gain the attention of men, right?
Yep.
And later in life, it's pretty obvious that she knows what she's doing when she's trying to get the attention of a guy. And she's probably pretty good at it since she's been doing it her entire life. And yet, she always blames the guy for falling for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think...
I don't know if it's not clear yet, but I'm just not a fan of this chick.
I think that she... Because, she talks about how she, like, has been doing a lot of therapy, and she went to therapy, and she tried to, like, deal with all of her stuff, but I don't think she actually ever really dealt with it, because she kind of sees all men as, like, Uncle Jerry, who Uncle Jerry was the bad uncle in the that raped her as a child. And I really do think that she never really let that concept go. She just sees every man as Uncle Jerry. And even if she, like, cares about the person or she loves the person, she never really allows real feeling to happen. It's all manipulation, in my opinion.
She also goes after pretty aggressive dudes. Mm-hmm. Like, her first husband was a bit of a narcissist.
100% a narcissist.
And I think, like, later on, doesn't she find out that he was part of, like, a white supremacy type thing?
Yeah. He goes to jail or something for being a part of a white supremacy group. And, I mean, because she went to high school with him, and even at that point, like, they were just friends, and he was kind of a dick to her through that whole process, too. I don't know why. And he was gay.
Yes.
And then they got married.
Okay, so we're skipping around, but really with the whole family thing, we don't learn a whole lot about the family other than she's raped repeatedly, and she's kind of loose with her, like, sexuality as she gets into a more, like, puberty age. Like, she's not opposed to having sex with boys her age or even a little bit older, because that's just part of the family thing. But then eventually she gets sick of it and she leaves. moves in with a sister of hers that also left, and then enrolls herself in a public school. And prior to this, she had been getting homeschooled at the compound with the family. Which, you know, if you take away the rape part, just like not do that, I think a lot of people would find what the family did to be really appealing.
Yeah, I mean, except maybe the begging part, but like, I mean, they've homesteaded.
Yeah.
Essentially, like, they had their own little compound that they just kind of thrived.
And they homeschooled and taught religious scripture.
Outside of, like, yeah, the having sex with children part. I mean, it was a lot of people, like, when people talk about let's have a little community where we all have, like, a garden in our own little house or whatever, like the tiny house communities, you know, that's kind of what they did. Mm-hmm. Essentially, but
they went a little bit further than that.
They went to the yucky side.
I wonder how hard it is to avoid that, because to me, it seems like the only big groups that you see that were like successful as far as people joining are the ones that are like crazy rapey vibe.
I think it's just because they get the most attention, because when people hear about it, they're like, what the heck? You know? Because I'm sure there's plenty of, like, there's nudist communities and, like, communes all over the place, but you don't really hear about them as much because, I mean, if you're not doing anything bad, you don't get press, right?
That's a fair point. And I'm going to have to look into it, because I'm under the impression that those they fail. Or they don't ever get as big.
They probably don't get as big. But.
So anyways, she enrolls herself in high school. And then she meets this dude who's kind of a dick to her. But she, like, plays with that. And, maybe. Does she meet him in college? She must meet him in college. She marries him. So eventually they get a divorce, and she calls for the divorce, and he says no. And I was listening. Who was I listening to? I don't know who I was listening to, but there was an idea brought to my attention about the problem with marriage and no-fault divorce. And the problem with no-fault divorce is that there's no real incentive to stay. Like, if things get tough, the ability to just leave kind of nullifies the idea of getting married in the first place. Mm-hmm. There's supposed to be some sort of restraint so that the people are forced, in a way, to work out their differences and build on that. And although this dude was a total douche, I did kind of respect the fact that he was like, no, we need to work on this. And then she was like, nah, fuck you.
I don't remember what her reasoning for wanting a divorce even was.
They were both in the army, and they weren't spending any time together.
Which, like, she joined the military because of him. And then, obviously, you're not... Like, this was during Afghanistan. So, like, obviously, if you join the military, you're not going to spend time together. Like, you're going to be deployed. You're on different platoons. You're, like...
And it's not that he raped her. He was just a dick.
He was just a dick. Which, he was a dick from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, even when they were friends.
It's kind of like the part of the reason why it seems like she even went for him anyways. Just because he was, like, controlling over her. And she wanted to be docile. Because that's how she's been raised.
That's definitely a trauma response.
Yeah.
100% trauma response. Yeah. And then they had a nasty divorce.
Well, I don't think it was that nasty. She basically let him have everything.
Yeah, but there was a little bit of nasty.
Yeah. But even with that, even with no qualms, he was like, no, this is bullshit. Now, I think he was trying to save his reputation. He wanted to get into politics later, and in order to do that, I'm assuming he was under the impression that he needed a wife. And then, obviously, all that fell apart when they got a divorce, because then he became a white supremacist.
Yep. which, yucky.
Okay.
He probably shouldn't be in a politician place anyway.
Yeah. Although, actually, he'd probably fit in quite well.
Yeah, that's probably where he learned it.
Okay. So the second half of this book, she joins the army, and it talks about during this time. Oh, wait, we gotta back up. There's another really interesting part about the family. So the family is run, like the head guy is this dude, this old creeper guy, right? But eventually he dies. And then the person who takes over for him is some woman who clearly knows what's going on and makes very minor changes. I'm pretty sure that's when they were like, don't fuck girls after puberty until they're 16.
Yeah, that was
like the woman's rule, but it's like, wow, he really, really went far on that one.
Yeah, and in the podcast that I listened to with Daniella, because the interviewer was like, so once that lady took over, like things got a little bit better, and Daniella was like, well,
yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily say it got better. It just changed a little bit. Like things just adapted a slight bit, but the fundamental part of it was the same. It's just, there were a little bit more rules.
And even, well, did she talk about then, like, that there are evil women out there too? It's not just men.
She did say that the lady,
because in the book she doesn't really talk about it.
No, in the interview she did talk about how like that lady wasn't really any better than the original prophet guy was. But she doesn't really ever say that she was evil or anything. She just like says that she wasn't much better. But she also attributes that to growing up in the cult as well, or like being in the cult for a long amount of time, because I'm pretty sure that was like the prophet's wife or daughter or somebody close to him.
Yeah, but if you're that close to the top, you gotta know what you're doing.
Yeah. I think she didn't want to change it, but she wanted...
Do you think it's possible if you grow up in an environment where rape is like a natural occurrence that you actually think it's okay?
100%.
So what made Daniella different then? Because she didn't think it was okay.
I think that she...
Like, which one is like the fringe?
Her mom kind of caused Daniella to stop believing and all that stuff, because her mom's the one that would like get her books that were like normal people books and like would like teach her lessons and stuff that was kind of outside of their culture.
Yeah.
And so I think that caused Daniella to question more than the other kids in the cult, because she had an outside perspective and she was learning because the girls weren't even really supposed to read.
It's true.
So
it's because knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power. So I think that had a lot to do with it, was that Daniella had access to the outside opinion, whereas most of the other kids in the cult did not. And the other kids in the cult just saw Daniella getting, punished all the time. So they're like, well, I don't want to be like her, because I don't want to get spanked and put in a room for the whole day.
6 hours. No bathroom break.
Yeah. Like, when you see other people getting punished, then that's a fear tactic in and of itself, is that, like, you see someone else getting punished, you don't want to be like that, because punishment sucks.
I guess it's just hard for me to fathom anybody, even if you're growing up around it, to see that happening to children and just be like, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't really... Like, obviously it's awful, so, like...
Yeah, I'm not trying to, like, trap you.
I think that, when they're saying that, like, this is what Jesus wants you to do, and they're using religion, too, and I think that's a big piece in and of itself, because churches throughout history, any church, any religion, has especially, the extremists, and usually that's where cults come from, is the extreme sides of religion. Mm-hmm. They have a tendency to, like, twist it so far that you kind of lose rationality a little bit.
I should have did more research on this cult. The book really doesn't give enough details about how the inner workings and what the lessons actually were and the brainwashing tactics and whatnot. And I feel like that all have been really interesting information. It would have made the book way better.
I agree.
So she's in the army, and she becomes an intelligence officer, which is new for women to be able to do, right? This is right around the time where they're finally letting women enter the front lines.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's one of the people that started that.
Yeah. And how do you feel about that? About women fighting on the front lines?
I mean, as a woman, if you are capable of a position, if you are actually capable of a position, I think that you should do that position. I think that a lot of time, the example of like, it's harder for men because they're automatically going to save the girl. That's a big argument in a lot of people's arguments. But I think, if you have skills that are necessary or useful in a situation, in any situation, then I don't see why gender has anything to do with a position.
I remember the controversy was the argument that you just made was obviously made. Mm-hmm. The idea that men would lose focus and pay more attention to the women, but I'm under the impression that the bigger argument was the physical standards to even get into the army, and those being allegedly unfair towards women. And my idea was that there are men that can't do
right
what needs to be done. And there are less women than men joining. And to then, use those statistics to say these requirements are too hard for women, I think is kind of ridiculous.
I agree 100%, because I know plenty of men who are very, very strong men, and I know plenty of men who are not strong men, and I know plenty of women who are very strong, capable women, and I know plenty of women, it's skill-based. Yeah. I don't think that any job should be held against somebody based on gender, ever. I think it should be skill-based. Mm. If you can complete the job and do it well, I think that you should be more than capable of doing whatever job that is, whether that be front lines in the military or a secretary in a job, because that's considered a more female-based job. But now you'll walk into a building and there'll be receptionists who are men too, or nurses. That's another great example. That was a predominantly female role for most of.
I think civilian jobs it's not really fair to compare those to a military branch.
But even in the military, nurses
or battlefield position,
medics were predominantly male and nurses were predominantly female. And I think, that's also military based. And World War II is a prime example of that. Mm-hmm. And in the military, most women that were in the military up until Daniella did her stuff, so around
2001.
Desert Storm time.
90s. Okay.
Yeah. Most of the women who joined the military or had military roles were desk jobs.
Are you a vet?
Am I? No.
Okay.
My dad is, though, and both my grandparents are.
I do know, I have a lady friend who's a vet. She was in the Air Force, but I told her about this book, and she had not read it, and I asked her to read it because I'd really like her input on it.
I want to hear her input on it.
She's our age, though, but then, so she came in a little bit later, but I also found out that one of Harmony's friends' friends, okay?
Yep.
A parent that is somewhat associated to other parents in my circle of acquaintances there's a wife that is, I imagine, around Daniella's age that was also in the army. And I'd really like to talk to her.
Yeah,
I feel like these are the people you need to talk to.
I think, especially for the second half of the book, because the second half of the book, I mean, Daniella definitely still is very self-focused.
Well, by the way, the message here is that the army for women at that time was very rapey.
Very, very rapey. Like, basically, she was told that going overseas,
you will be raped.
You will be raped. In fact, I think her sergeant at the time tells her, "Whatever you do, don't get raped." That was the first thing he said to her.
Well, that was one thing I wanted to say too. So she joins the army. She becomes an intelligence officer. And, she's not really supposed to fraternize with other dudes. And she certainly doesn't fraternize with other people of, her same level. But she just immediately starts dating a captain. Right.
Right away.
What the fuck?
And, it really kind of bothered me that she was doing that stuff right away because, when she joined the military and she was getting, all those, promotions and stuff, she's kind of a badass.
Yeah, she's
I'm like, heck yeah, you killing it. Go, take the world on, because with her background. And then she, gets this amazing job. She keeps just, upping, just to, fuck it up by fucking people.
Yeah.
Why?
She goes after the powerful guy, too. She goes after the army's version of that fucking Uncle Jerry guy or whatever his name was. And
then she wonders why she's treated like poop.
Yeah. And that just goes back to me, thinking in my head, this chick, she has been groomed. That's the proper term, but more or less, professionally trained to woo powerful men.
Yes. Yep. And I wonder if part of that's because she was considered royalty in that cult.
Yeah.
So it's almost was it just in her head that she needed to find the most powerful shitty men to woo and then be shit on?
I guess this also comes back to the age-old question of just being the woman that is provocatively dressed. If anything happens to her, does she just get what she was asking for? Because I guess to steelman my own argument that this chick is a professional succubus.
Yeah.
Or seducer. Does that mean that she deserves to get the punishment that she got?
No. She didn't deserve any of that stuff. I really think that she just needed, instead of joining the military, she just needed to frickin' go to therapy. That's really what the main thing was, because she hadn't healed from that situation. She got out of the cult when she was 16, 17.
Yeah, she didn't do public high school for very long.
No, she was there her junior and senior year, I think.
Yeah.
Or her senior year. And then she went to college and she met her ex-husband. And then, she was having a good old time in college. She was working. She was doing great. And at that point, I think she really needed to focus on her and her healing what happened to her as a child. But instead, she joined the military, which is just going from, being in a cult to 5 years later being in a different kind of disciplinary
cult.
Yeah. And it was just too similar. She went from one cult to a different cult, pretty much. Yep. And she just set herself up for failure, in my opinion.
She did.
She was a really good runner, though.
I'm curious how fast this chick actually was, because she boasts that she is faster than most of these men in the army. And I'm like, really?
Apparently she actually was. She was very, very fast.
Well, that just goes to show that the standards to get into the Army weren't really that high.
I mean, the
So,
standards to get into
and the
Army.
argument then that women had different criteria to get past, most specifically the PT exams, I think was just complete bullshit. I think they should have been exactly the same. Should be the same requirement. Obviously, it needs to be possible for both sexes to get through. But I don't think they were impossible. The fact was that you just didn't have enough women making the attempt.
Because, and I think, I mean, obviously, I don't know the actual statistics for today, but I wonder what.
I'm under the impression that they're all fucked up now, and like women don't have to do stuff even remotely close to what the guys have to do. But I could be talking right out of my ass right now.
I haven't done enough research on but I've also heard that like boot camp and stuff is way different than it used to be. Like it's way easier now.
Yeah, they might have actually just lowered the standards for both sexes significantly to the point to where it's like now it should be hard to get in. Mm-hmm. People should fail.
Right. They should.
It should not be a guaranteed thing.
I think the other thing is that we're such a military-focused country that they're kind of struggling for people signing up for the military. Because people our age, like in our age group, kind of really for the most part, want no part of that. And I think that has a lot to do with it, too. I'm not saying everybody, because obviously we still have a military. We still have people who are 18, 19, 20, 26 signing up to join the military. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's a lot less focused than it used to be. And I know a lot of that has to do with like the GI Bill.
Well, that and we don't really have a call to arms right now. Like 9/11 was a huge call to arms.
It was.
There wasn't a whole lot of people joining prior to that. But then when that happened, we had a lot of people decide to do their duty or what they thought their duty was. We don't really, and we're kind of in a lull right now. So I'm not really surprised that there's not a whole lot of people joining. But you're right. That doesn't mean then that they need to make it easier to get in to better appeal to the crowd. Right. The standards should still stay the same.
Because they're service people. Like
you want them to be the best of the best. They need to be professionals.
Yes, and they need to be good at what they do, and they need to be, it's just a different world, and not everyone is supposed to be able to be in that world. Yeah. Like that's supposed to be
it's like if you want to get into the special forces, like the SEAL team or something, like a very low percentage of people actually get into that, that try. Yeah. And there people die trying to get in.
Yes, they actually do. they really do. Yep.
And I'm okay with that. I'm like, it should be that way. Mm-hmm.
Well, those are people doing the stuff that nobody else in the world wants to do.
Yeah, they need to be the best of the best. Mm-hmm. Fuck.
You can't always be the best.
Okay. So there's this part in this book that I'm going to read now. I feel like when she gets into the Army, there's this constant message where she's like, don't get raped. Don't get raped. Don't get raped. And then there's a part in the book where she claims to be raped. And I think it's really forced. And so I'm going to read this passage. Before I do, some of the backstory is, first of all, this dude that is going to be allegedly the rapist isn't even part of the Army.
He's a contractor.
He's a contractor.
A civilian contractor from the United States.
And they're like in a relationship together.
Well, kind of. He's got an actual girlfriend, like a real girlfriend, but this is his like fun girlfriend for being over there. And so in the military,
Canadian too.
Yeah, you're not supposed to fornicate, so you're not supposed to have sex with anybody. Period. So now you can go.
Okay. At some point, we began to argue, and I moved to the bed, wanting to be physical, wanting to be held one last time. I'd taken his shirt off, and he'd put it back on, but he looped his arms around me anyway. We were fighting, but also making out. When he pinned my wrist, I thought it was a joke. When he'd begun to move on top of me, I didn't get upset. Wasn't this what I'd wanted? When he began to tear at my clothes, I helped him take them off. But when he turned me over and held me down, face pressed hard to the pillow, cue Bill Burr's bit about what women want in bed. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And began to do things to me that I'd never given him permission to do. I opened my eyes and gazed. Oh, wow. I should have pre-recorded this. I opened my eyes and my gaze was drawn to my boots on the floor. My combat boots. My one thing made for women. Meant to stay on base. Oh, by the way, they're not on base. They're in his apartment building. That she willingly went to. But which he had already been out on so many missions. Oh, let me start this over. My combat boots, my one thing made for women, meant to stay on base, but which had already been out on so many missions in the open sand. They had already faced what the men thought was danger. And there they were, unlaced and haphazardly tossed into the corner. I stared at the way the laces pulled on either side. One boot standing straight up and the other slightly tipped over, leaning on its buddy. I realized I didn't have a buddy. Didn't have anyone I'd be able to tell. Anyone I could lean on. I thought that person had been him. The same man on top of me. Holding me down as I tried to struggle. There they were, the evidence of my crime. The only thing any investigation might care about. I had taken off my boots. I had sat on his bed. I had wanted him to touch me. No one would ever believe that I was being raped by a man I had been trying to sleep with, and nobody would care. You're right. That's my argument. I think she's right. I don't think that was it, but that was her being raped in the army. Mm-hmm. The dude fucked her in a way he just, there wasn't the position she wanted. So now it's rape.
Well, I think
that's how I read it. I literally had to stop listening to the audiobook for days because I was so upset. I was like, no, this man is being falsely accused right now. This is bull.
I think, it's such a sticky subject, right? And I will. So
wait. Before you go, I just want to give the man's perspective here first. Just for a second.
Ahead.
Just for a second. So, for all the guys out there, just imagine. You are getting down with this chick, right? And everything's going exactly the way that any two mutually attracted adults would go, right? And then all of a sudden she's like, no, I want to be on top. And you're like, okay. And then she just starts really grinding on you. And it's really painful. And you don't like it. You're being raped, man. You're being raped. That's what this chick is saying. That's how I took that. I was like, nah, dude. Sometimes you just got to take one. Like, sometimes you just got to let them do their thing. And then you can have your turn. Like, what?
I think. Okay. I think that's. It is very. It's very hard because this is such a tricky. It's such a tricky, touchy subject, because in similar situations it can be considered as rape. I think in this case, she should have, instead of closing down and not doing anything about it, because she kind of started it. He broke up with her. He told her to leave. And then she started taking his clothes off and all that stuff. So, and they were fighting. They were arguing through all this. There was high emotions.
Because makeup sex is the best sex.
But I think that in that case, instead of being docile and just letting it happen, she should have said no.
That's her nature.
Which, yes. And that's where this is another trauma response, right? 100%. another trauma response, and she's
Oh my God. Where is the line between trauma responses and taking responsibility for your own actions?
I mean, she should have taken, and that's why I said she should have said something. Like she,
Yeah, I guess, in the sentence it does say that
she was struggling.
she struggled, but we don't know what does that even mean?
I don't think it needs to be any more than that, though. Like, I don't know. I think in this case, we're missing a lot of detail, right?
That's what I'm saying. There's not enough detail on what this struggle actually was, because I gotta tell you, some chicks just struggle and want it to continue.
And we don't know what their relationship, because they were dating. They had a good, healthy relationship he was cheating on his girlfriend at home, but she seemed happy with him.
And we don't even know what she considers, because this book doesn't go into any details about what her sexual interests actually are. So we don't really know what kind of sex they had on the regular.
Right.
And how this differed from it. But I can imagine that she was not a stranger to slightly aggressive sex.
No, she was raped by a dude, an adult.
Many times. And maybe I'm gonna go out on a limb here, that as an adult that may have become something that she needed to have. It had to be that kind of sex for her to even get pleasure from it. Now, I'm just speculating.
Right.
But she doesn't say anything to the contrary. And
yeah, I don't know. That situation is, and I'm not gonna lie, that was one of the situations that I was actually really interested to see your point of view because to be honest, basically the second half of the book is her just kind of hating on men, and men can do no good. Men are no good. There are a few women that can do no good too. She had that one kid that really screwed her over.
Yeah.
But I think for this part of the story, I think the reason why she said that nobody would believe her is because in technicality, it's such a...
Dude, it was mutual up until he put her in a position she didn't like.
Yep. And actually she was kind of the one that had initiated it and started it. She was taking his clothes off. She was taking her clothes off. She was initiating it. And that's where consent becomes such an interesting thing, because he was not consenting until he did consent, at which point she decided she didn't want to consent anymore, but never actually communicated that.
Yeah.
So
as men, do we need to start asking permission to switch positions?
I don't know. I think this is a prime example of why communication is a really important part of life. You need to communicate what you're okay with and what you're not. And
I understand the argument. I think there's an argument here saying that she's been so traumatized her entire life that,
she doesn't know how to communicate when she's uncomfortable with something.
Yeah, but dude, there has to be a point where you can't fall back on that as an excuse. Where at what, can she just not, she shouldn't be having sex at all then at that point. If she can't actually say what she likes or doesn't like because she's been so traumatized, then let's just take her sex privileges away. But that's not fair either,
No.
right? So to say,
honestly, I think the part that was the most fucked up in that situation to me was that he gave her, they have these forms of currency called pongs or something.
okay.
And she
at the end,
and he gave her all of his pongs. I think that's kind of the part
paid for it.
Yeah, he paid for it. That part kind of was ooh.
That's after they. I guess I didn't read it. I guess you gotta read the book, but yes, at the very end he pays for it.
And I think that part got really yucky for me.
But they were also fighting.
They were. Because he was breaking up with her because he was going home to his girlfriend. Which, he obviously shouldn't have had a girlfriend. But
I guess I would like to I'm not going to ask you this directly because I don't want to put pressure on you to answer this, but I'm going to ask the listeners. Just be like, have you ever had angry sex with your partner and like maybe it wasn't that enjoyable? I mean, was that rape? Because that's how I see this. It was just they were mad at each other. Yeah. And you know what? And then it was like at the end of it, he was leaving anyway. And he's like, fuck it, bitch. I'll give you all my pogs.
Yeah, because she had asked for him before all this had happened. She had been like, well, since you're leaving, you should give me all your pongs.
Yeah.
And then he did.
So
I think
there's contextual arguments to be made here.
Yeah. I think that it's a very fine line. And I guess, you know, as someone who's been in situations where I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I put myself in those positions, and things happen that I didn't want to happen, despite anything else that I said. I think in this case, like, I spent many years personally, like, having to come to terms with the fact that, like, I did say no, and it happened, you know. But I blamed myself through all that because, like, I was there. I put myself in that position. It's a very fine line that I think that we don't really have a clear view on that because, you know, with the people that I said no to, in their minds, like, I was in their house. Like, I was there. So, you know, they probably don't see it as they did anything wrong. You know what I mean?
Here's the opposite, though. Let's say. No, I'm not saying this is you, but I do know this happens. Let's say a woman invites a man into her room, and there's a clear understanding that there's a mutual attraction to each other. So it's not specifically said, hey, come to my room to fuck. But it is implied in the invitation. Which I guess is controversial to begin with. But then, nothing happens. Imagine, I'm going to put myself in a position where I can be judged for being a little bitch, but that's okay. I don't care. But imagine you go into a bed with a woman, for guys that you're really attracted to and totally want to go all the way with, but then you lay in bed and she kind of just lays there. It doesn't really give you any sort of sign of confirmation to go forward or any sign that she doesn't want you to keep going. And then nothing happens because you're not going to put yourself in a position to where you're going to force her to do anything, right? Mm-hmm. And who wants to face a denial when you're already in bed with this chick? Okay?
Yeah.
And then later on, you'll be talking to the same person and you find out that they prefer it when a man just takes what he wants. And they wanted you to just take that leap and make the attempt.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I mean, being a woman sucks a majority of the time. It really does. But I would never want to be a guy in that situation.
Yeah.
It's like you guys kind of have it, like you really, it's such, because every woman is so different, right? And they all want different things. And we don't really know what we want on 90% of the time. So it puts you guys in a position where you're constantly having to guess, like, what does this one want now?
Yeah.
And I think that's where, like, communication is such a big deal.
So I feel like what's being asked of men right now is on whether or not they are given permission. If you're a man, you're going to make the attempt and you're going to take the denial. Mm-hmm. But she might still let you do it without denying you, and then later be like, you fucking raped me. So it's just like, it's a fucking trap.
It's definitely a slippery slope. It's definitely a slippery slope because, you know, so I'll actually tell. I have two situations.
Right on.
I'll tell my younger situation though, because that's a little bit more on the same. Anyways, so I was 16. I was working at a place with this other fellow, and I really liked him. I had a big old crush on him, and he finally asked me on a date. So we were gonna, after work on a Friday night, we were gonna go to Taco Bell. We were 16.
Dude, Taco Bell was happening back in those days.
We were 16. So he was gonna, so at the time I didn't have like a car or my license, I don't think. So he was going to take us to Taco Bell in his car, and then he was gonna drive me home. That was the
classic approach.
That was the assumption I was under, okay? So my mom drops me off at work. I'm so excited about this date. So we get off work and we get in his car, and he says, hey, I need to stop at my house real quick, and then we'll go to Taco Bell.
Grab the condoms.
So, you know, me being the person that I am, I'm pretty naive and I'm very trusting. So I'm like, yeah, sure. So we get to his house, and he's like, and he had a big old house, by the way. Like, his parents were wealthy. And
damn straight, married for the money.
So he's like, hey, I need to go up to my room real quick. You want to come in? And I was like,
classic.
I mean, I guess.
He's setting you up.
So we went upstairs to his room, and he like shut the door behind me, and he said that we just had to grab something real quick.
This guy's got game.
So then this man pulls his pants down in front of me and says, so you gonna suck it?
That's not classy.
And I was like, what? And he was like, well, I figured that's why you came up here. And I was like, no.
That was bold.
So then, you know, sex happened. And in that situation, like, I didn't really know what was going on. And I also had, like, no way to escape this situation, right? So then he took me home. And when we got out of the car...
Wait, you didn't even go to Taco Bell?
We didn't even go to Taco Bell. Like...
Dude.
It was probably one of the most... I mean, it was one of the most uncomfortable situations in my life.
That guy was a straight-up douchebag.
And then we get back in the car. I think we're going to go to... I want Taco Bell. Like,
yeah.
I was just in a situation that I was very uncomfortable. And then... We don't even get Taco Bell. Like, what the hell? And then he drives me home, and as I'm getting out of the car, he looked at me and he said, just remember, my dad's a judge, and nobody will believe you. And then he left.
Holy shit.
At which point I was like, well, I put myself in this situation. And it took me a really long time to like come to terms with the fact that like that was actual rape. Like I was raped 100%.
Kind of want to take back all the game stuff I was saying prior.
Like,
because that wasn't cool.
But so that one was like legit rape, right?
Yeah.
But then
I can agree with that more than like black and white compared to what this chick just described in her book.
So, but I had a situation kind of close to hers. I had a friend from college who I had come up to Wisconsin to visit. This is when I lived in Arizona. I had come up to Wisconsin to visit, and he was going to teach me how to do video editing because he was a videographer.
Classic.
And so we were going to drink whiskey and edit videos. That was the plan.
Perfect.
Well, then, you know, he started making out with me, and I was like, dude, you're my friend. Like, this is weird. Like, not on... But we'd been drinking, right? So then sex did happen.
Oh, my God.
And, like, I woke up the next morning, and I was like, this is weird. And he was one of my best friends. Like, we don't talk anymore. Like, after that, I stopped talking to him. But, you know, in that situation, like...
Well, when alcohol gets involved, everything gets fucking fuzzy.
It's a slippery slope because technically, like...
But, by the way,
did happen.
Who the fuck video edits while drinking? I can't do that shit.
Well, it's fun. It's fun. It's a fun ordeal.
But the video ends up being garbage.
Well, he was just teaching me how to, like, use different stuff.
Oh, so it wasn't an actual project.
No, it was.
Okay.
He was just teaching me how to use After
He was
Effects.
showing off. That was his
Yeah.
foreplay. Okay.
But like, totally didn't know he was into me. Totally didn't understand that whole. And this is where like I'm very naive because
See,
I didn't read that situation to what it actually became.
so some guys do just make the attempt.
Yeah.
And if you don't say no, we'll just go all the way.
And that's so I don't.
And women are more naturally tended to be agreeable people.
Right.
So they are less likely to say no.
Which makes this whole situation the situation it is.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's
I don't even know what the answer to this question is. Like, clearly the raising of children of both sexes needs to be better.
yes. There needs to be an understanding of like communication and respecting communication when it happens.
And the situation that I described to you, I feel like I did the right thing, but at the same time, I feel like a bitch because I feel like I should have made the attempt because she actually wanted it.
But she also never communicated that in any way.
I know.
So like
That's the game.
I think that you did the right thing because what's to say that you did try and she didn't want that and
well,
then
a woman will tell me I did the right thing, but if I told the story to a dude, they'd be like, dude.
and that's where we need to get on the same terms. That's where this is the real problem is that men and women need to like have a mutual understanding of like the boundaries, I guess.
Whatever.
I don't know. It's such a slippery slope, and I think a big problem is that like the society went from being like women kind of it went from one extreme to the other, where like men were all powerful and were like using women as property a majority of the time, to this like new society of like men kind of suck.
Well, it was a feminist movement.
Yeah.
What's the term I'm thinking of? It's like casual sex, man. I feel like casual sex really fucks shit up.
It does.
For both men and women.
I agree. I agree because it doesn't.
I'm not saying that it was perfect back in the day, but the idea that sex was to be something that you had with somebody who was, you know, like legitimately tied to you in some way, the most popular way being marriage, arguably more ideal than casual sex.
I agree. I think you understood. I mean, you understand boundaries a little bit better. Like for example, both of my older sisters have been married for. Let's see, I'm 29. My oldest sister Jenny.
Holy
has
shit,
been
you're only
married-
29?
Yeah.
Why am I so old?
Because you were born, before me.
When's your birthday?
My birthday was June 25th.
Oh my god, so you just turned 29?
Yeah. Anyways, besides the point,
Oh my god.
my oldest
I don't even know what's
sister-
real anymore. Okay,
So-
go ahead. I'm done.
My oldest sister, Jenny, she's been married for 19 years now.
How old is she?
She's 16 years older than me.
Holy
so,
cow. Okay.
Yeah. She's been married for 19 years, and she lost both her and my sister, Heidi.
How
Like-
old is that one?
She is 13 years older than me.
Were you in an accident?
I was, yeah, but I was also the second wife, so I was an accident. I'm a bastard child, and then,
Oh, so these sisters are your dad's children?
correct.
Does your mom only have one child?
Me and my brother. I have
Oh,
a
that's
little
right. I
brother.
totally forgot about him.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
it's okay. So he's also only like 26.
Yes, I knew he was young.
Yeah,
Did not realize you were as young as you are.
yeah. I also don't really act super young either. So
I'll give you that.
Heidi and Jenny both saved themselves till marriage.
Really?
And both of them are happily married. So Jenny and John have been married for 19 years, and Mark and Heidi have been married for 14 or 15 years, and both saved themselves to marriage, happily married, have kids.
How old were they when they got married?
They were 20. So the joke is that all three of us sisters found our true loves at 25. So they were Heidi.
Damn, so they waited a long time.
Yeah, they were both. I actually, fun fact, I lost my virginity before my sister Heidi did. Who's 13 years older than me. That's not funny.
Well, I mean, I don't even think it's funny that they waited. Like, that's a long time to wait.
But, you know, they found their person, and
That might be part of my brainwashing, though.
I mean, I think that...
For me, because I was raised in a culture where it's casual sex is okay. And now the idea of somebody waiting until they're 25 is just nearly unbelievable.
And, you know, for me, even... So, I grew up in very purity culture focus. I mean, I was pretty much raised by Amish people But... You know, I rebelled. Like, when my mom put me in school, I, like, started doing drugs and having sex and partying all the time. Like, I was a bad kid.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas, like, my sisters, you know, they're very religious, and they decided that was the choice that they wanted to make. And I have so much respect for them, because I think about all the situations that I put myself in. I think about all the relationships that I was in, or like the casual sex that I had. That was so meaningless and unnecessary and awful most of the time.
Yep.
And, you know, then I look at my two sisters who have beautiful marriages, and they, like, I'm closest with Heidi and Mark, and Mark is such an amazing man, okay? He messages me, and he, like, calls me his little sister, and, like,
cool guy.
He's always there for me and Luke, even though we're only half siblings with Heidi. And, I mean, I didn't really grow up with them. Like, I didn't really start interacting with my sisters until Heidi and Mark got married. I was in Heidi and Mark's wedding, and they just have such a beautiful marriage, and it makes me a little sad that, like, I didn't get to have that moment to give the person that, like, that moment, you know what I mean?
Like, you wanted your virginity to be with the guy that you stayed with forever?
It'd be nice. I mean, instead of, like, all the douchebags and douche girls that
Well, something also that I didn't know that this was even a thing, but I'm still going to use allegedly because I still don't actually know, but I've heard from multiple sources that women do this thing called pair bonding, especially with the men that they have children with. And so, like, the more casual partners you have, the more calloused your pair bonding ability becomes, and then sex becomes more and more and more meaningless.
I think I've heard that too. I've actually heard that, because women do.
And that's just for women, because men are kind of wired to just take the opportunities that they get.
Yeah, because they want to, like, populate the earth. That's, like, your whole. That's what you want.
Yeah, and women pair bond.
Because we want good partners to raise our children with.
Well, that, and you want to like the person that you have a child with.
Yes. Whereas men don't care.
Not saying that they don't. Just biologically, like, evolved wise, we're less inclined to bond in that way with you, but women bond very strongly with
their partners.
Their partners, and especially their children as well.
It's because we're the nurturing side of the naturing.
Yeah, you need to. It is dependent on you to be okay with raising a child for at minimum, like, 2 years, you know, until they can, like, eat solid foods and shit.
Yeah. Yep. You have to, like, feed and raise.
And you want to, like, at least be able to tolerate the dude that should stick around. Because you need him there to take care of because, tending to a human infant is a fucking tall order.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know yet. But
well, it is.
I mean, they cry a lot and they need food all the time and
Yep.
diapers and all that stuff. I mean, they're a big responsibility.
There is a question that I've heard multiple times too. That's interesting that I find interesting to think about, and the question is like, what makes you think the woman's mind is wired for her benefit? Because the argument is that your mind is not wired to benefit you like a man's mind is.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind is wired to benefit the baby.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty wild question to ask.
I would say that that's probably pretty true.
Yeah.
Because, and I think that's why, on average, you see that women tend to be more like giving and caregiving and whatnot, is because our brains are literally wired to just be caregivers a majority of our lives.
Yeah. The term that I think is more commonly used is your a trait to be more agreeable.
Mm-hmm. But even if that's the case, like,
It's on it's on a spectrum though,
sure,
because there are women that kill their babies.
that is true. But I do think that, the agreeable thing isn't even necessarily a part of that. I think that is a whole nother wiring. But I think that, like, the caregiving side, because, if you piss a mama off,
Yeah, she becomes a
you have
fucking
hell-
psycho.
You have hell to pay. Like,
Yeah.
Even in, like,
That's why
the
you don't
animal
fuck with
kingdom-
mama bears.
right, even in the animal kingdom, like, when a mom has a baby, they aren't as agreeable. Like, they become
No, yeah, they're
protective.
agreeable to the baby because
Yes.
you don't want, if a baby's crying and screaming, you don't want to. Ideally, you don't want the mother to be like, "Fuck you."
When my cats cry, I'm like, what can I do for you?
Fucking cats. I hate cats. But yes.
Especially, like, Popcorn, because she has this really adorable little voice. It's like, meow, meow. And when she mews, I'm like, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you need something?
Oh my god. So I understand why people, especially those who don't have children, they get really attached to their pets. I just have this story. So I was dating this girl once, and she had this cat, and we were gonna get a place together that at the time wasn't allowing pets. And I say at the time because after I left, a lot of pets moved into that place. But okay, at the time, pets weren't allowed. She had this cat, and I was like, you know what? I got a friend that I can con into taking this cat. Okay. And I won't say his name. I'll tell you off the air if you don't figure it out. But I call him up and I'm like, hey man, I got this cat. Do you want it? And he goes like, no, I don't want another cat. And I go, all right, well, I'm just going to drop it off on the streets then. He goes, no, Andy, you can't do that. And I go, listen, we have two options here. Because I'm moving into this place no matter what. So option one, you take this cat. Option two, I just drop it off somewhere randomly. No, you can't take that. Well, then are you going to take it? No, I don't want the cat. And we went back and forth. Finally, he caved, right? He's like, all right, I'll take the cat. So I drive the cat out to him. He falls in love with this cat. This cat, I don't like cats, but this cat was kind of cool. It was very social. Talk to you. It was unique, cat-wise, in my experience anyway. Fell in love with this cat. And not that long ago, the cat died. And he called he texted me to tell me about it. As if I gave a fuck. I really didn't care. I had no attachment to this cat. But I could tell that he was really sad. He was really sad. And I was like, listen, man, you gave that cat a great life. And I really appreciate you taking it in when you did. You did a good job. Okay? It's going to be okay. That cat loved you. Something along those lines. But I did not give a fuck about that cat. It just kind of amazes me.
I have a weird...
But I also have a little human.
You have a little human.
And it's just like to compare that to a pet, it's not comparable. It's different
I
things.
suppose. And like I don't know because I've never had a kid, so I have no idea. But I do get very attached to animals. Like I refer to my cats as my children, and I will tell people like my children are at home. In fact, I don't know if I should tell this story. Actually, I might get in trouble. Never mind. I refer to them as my children quite often.
Well, you and Adam though have taken in cats that just showed up in your basement.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I was never a cat person before we got Pepperoni. Like,
Really?
I really wasn't.
Popcorn, pepperoni. What? How many cats do you have, and what are their names, and are they all food?
So I have 2 cats.
Okay, so they are all food.
The oldest, his name is Dr. Pepperoni Algernon Fresca, and his sister is Colonel Popcorn Elizabeth Fresca. Can you guess who named them?
Yes. Was one of those ones the one that was found that just showed up in the basement?
They both were.
Oh,
So
okay.
So for the listeners, I will tell these stories.
Okay.
I was never a cat person. I did not like cats. I grew up with barn cats, but like they came and went all the time. Like the kittens were cute, and then when they got big, like they disappeared. So I didn't know. I was never attached to them. Well, one day I worked in Sauk City at the time, and I got home from work one day, and I come home, and Adam's mom and niece and him are like in our kitchen, and there's this really ugly, dirty little kitten on my floor, and we weren't allowed to have cats at the time in our apartment, and so we're like trying to clean up this nasty little. He looked like a goblin, to be honest. Like, he was not a cute kitten. I mean, I thought he was adorable at the time. I think that's my mama nature happening. He was very, very sick. Like, he had snot coming out of his face, like, everywhere. His eyeballs were, like, all crusted and nasty. So I had the day off the next day, and Adam told me that I needed to, like, call the Humane Society, because we couldn't have a cat in our apartment. So I called the Humane Society. The Humane Society tells me I need to call the police department. The police department told me to put it back where I found it, and I was like, I found it in my basement. Like, it's gonna die. So then they told me I had to call the Humane Society again. So I called the Humane Society, and at this point, like, I have this sick kitten. I'm, like, crying. Because this poor baby is, like, sick. Mm-hmm. And I call the Humane Society, and the Humane Society tells me that it'll be $100 to surrender the kitten, and that more than likely they're going to put it down because of how sick he was. And at which point I was like, I'm going to pay you $100 to kill this kitten?
Oh my God.
So Adam and I decide that we're going to get him better, and then we're going to rehome him. Okay. Right? So $500 worth of vet bills later, we now have Pepperoni. And then, I shit you not, 6 months almost to the day, we hear another meow in the basement.
In the basement.
And Popcorn is now in our house too. And I love them. But I will tell you, I think if Pepperoni wasn't as sick as he was, I probably wouldn't be as attached to them.
Kicked his ass to the curb. Get out of here.
Well, because it was like, I had to give him, so Adam and I, but I did a majority of it. We had to give him, like, medicine in like a syringe thing, and then we had to give him pills, and then we had to put stuff on his eyes. Like, it was a whole ordeal. We had to do it multiple times a day. And like, when you are like making a little baby creature,
well, you're bonding with it at that point,
right? So then, after a month of, because originally our landlord only gave us a month because we were good people, and we were like, okay, we have a kitten in our house, it's kind of your fault because you didn't close the window in the basement. And our landlord told us that we could keep it for a month. Well, after a month of, like, bringing this cat back to life, like, I'm not going to give it away now. Yeah.
Well, I also think it's really hard to rehome cats. Like, yeah, if you compare them to dogs anyway.
Yeah, because everybody who has a cat because of something, like somebody found it.
Yeah, or a friend conned them into it. Mm-hmm. Threatened to just make it a street cat. Yeah. I'm a fucking asshole, but I don't care.
That's okay, Andy. I love you anyways. Anyway, we should probably get back to the book.
Well, I wanted to tell this other story about cats, though.
Tell another story about cats.
So there's this dude at work, and he's kind of a weirdo.
Okay.
He is the man version of the cat lady. So he's the cat guy. He's got like a bajillion cats. He lives by himself. I guess he's not very socially awkward. Like, he is socialized. But at the same time, he's weird. Anyways, he comes into work one day, and he's so devastated, which is odd because normally he's the kind of guy who at first is going to be kind of shy, and then he, with time, he gets like a window to be kind of sassy. But then he takes it too far, and he's kind of like obnoxious. Okay.
Okay.
So that's when I say he's socially awkward. That's what I mean by it. So, anyways, but normally he comes into work like in a very good mood and is overly sassy now. Okay, to the point where it's kind of fucking awkward. Like, okay, dude. Anyways, one day he comes in, he's really sad, which is unusual. But it's hard not to laugh at this guy, okay? For you, this is going to be a horrible nightmare story. But for me and all of our other coworkers, we are trying so hard not to laugh at this dude's face because we do understand that what he went through was devastating. But at the same time, we're like, oh my God. Okay. So he goes, one of us asks him, and we're kind of bullying him. I guess we're kind of... now that I'm thinking about it, we are kind of bullies.
Terrible, Andy.
But I just feel like it's not in a negative way. Like, we're just, I don't know. Anyways, he's really sad. We're like, why are you sad, man? He goes, oh, one of my cats died today. One of his 37 cats. I don't know how many cats he has. I don't even know where he lives. We imagine he lives somewhere outside of town by himself with a plethora of cats. Okay? That's all we know about this guy. One of his cats died. He had to take it to the vet. And we go, oh, man, what happened? Hiding our smiles because we're just like, Jesus Christ. This guy is so depressed about his cat right now. And he goes, my mom ran it over with the lawnmower. What? First of all, now he's really sad. Okay. And I'm like shifting eyes to like this other dude that I work with. And we're both in tune with like, we just want to be like, what? Like, your mom ran over your cat with a lawnmower? Then it gets better. He goes, my mom ran over the cat with a lawnmower, and then I took it to the vet. And then they put it down. What? How injured was this cat? Like, was this cat like chopped in half? And then you just fucking drove it to the vet? Like, was it a riding mower or a push mower?
Also, like, how do you not notice that a cat is in front of you?
Also, on top of that, why is your mom mowing your lawn?
Yeah.
Okay? We had all these questions. We're bullies. But we didn't ask these questions because we all knew that this guy was going through a very traumatic time in his life.
A lot of you were not asking questions.
Okay? But we're all like asking each other these questions with our eyes. And we're like, oh man, that sucks, dude. But seriously, I don't like, what do you do? In my mind, it's like, okay, if my cat got ran over by a fucking lawnmower, I would know at that point that it's done.
Right.
You just end it right there.
Yeah, that's like a mercy kill. So
you be the man, and you end its
because at
suffering.
that point, like, you're now, I don't know how far away the vet is, but like, you're having to put this poor cat through even more pain
Yeah.
by, like, driving, like, moving it.
I think he just wasn't man enough to do it himself.
You know, growing up on a farm, so I learned at a very young age that I grew up a little weird, right? But when I was in Greece, we were at we were on a cruise thing, and they were serving lamb, as the Greeks do, and these people were on the boat with me, and they were like talking about like, oh, how can you think of a lamb or whatever, and I was like, oh yeah, growing up on a farm, like all of the animals that I raised growing up, like, were food, like that was the purpose for them, right?
That's a fair point, yeah.
So, I had 3 sheep growing up. Their names were Joe, Coco, and Yoda. And,
You named them.
Well, yeah. I mean, they lived on the farm. We raised them, But, like, I also understood that when they got old, or, like, when it was time to butcher them, like, we were going to eat them.
I wonder if, so, like, I don't think ranchers name their cattle, right?
Probably not. But
because they have too many.
Yeah, we only had 3, and we didn't eat the goats, but we milked the goats. Like, we named some of the chickens if we liked, like, certain ones. We would name them. But, like, we understood that, like, we're going to eat them. So I think for me, like, in that situation, even I would have been like, give me even a 22, it's a cat. Like, and I will just put it out of its misery. Like, I'm not going to pick up this poor cat.
Yeah.
Because at that point, like, you're a dick. Because that cat, you're moving it, like, you're being an asshole by picking up that cat and taking it to the vet to have them put it down.
That's what we all thought.
That's hours of extra time that
it suffered.
That it suffered when you could have just... And I really don't understand how you don't notice that a cat is involved. Okay, like, that pisses me off a little bit.
Well, let's just play in the defense of his mother. First of all, she probably shouldn't even be mowing his fucking lawn.
No.
This guy's way older than me, which gives me the impression that his mom is pretty fucking old. She may not have the best eyesight, okay?
But then if you have...
I'm not going to blame the mom. First of all, you shouldn't have 37 cats allegedly on your property to begin with.
I had barn cats as a kid. We definitely had a lot of cats because, they reproduce like rabbits.
And you shouldn't make your mom mow your lawn.
No, like... I just feel really bad for that cat.
We all felt bad for the cat, and like, we all thought it was kind of funny that he was so devastated. But I'm just curious. It had to have been a rider, right? Because if you push mode it, how do you even? First of all, how did the cat even survive?
Yeah, that is a great question. I don't understand how the cat survived.
This must have been a fucking horror scene. So I just want everybody to imagine a cat freshly run over by a riding lawnmower that's still alive. You're welcome.
I mean, that's a badass cat, though. Like,
I just want to end the podcast on this horrible note. Yes. So imagine this cat freshly run over by this riding lawnmower in your hands, crying. To be put out of its misery.
He should have put it out of its misery.
He's not a good man.
I think that's awful. That he, like,
I would
have a. If you don't have a gun or anything, like, find something. Like,
yep.
That's
a rock.
That's awful. Like, the fact that he made it suffer for that long. That really
now at the same time, there's part of me that's like, dude, you did not do the right thing. And then there's another part of me that's like, I understand that was probably really hard.
Well, sure.
But you know what? Sometimes the right thing, well, actually a lot of the times, the right thing to do is not easy.
The majority of the time. The right thing to do is not the easy thing.
And that's a great note to end this episode on.
Yeah. Even though we haven't talked about the book for the past, like...
I feel like...
45 minutes.
First of all, you should read the book.
You should. I think that it'll make you it'll challenge your thoughts. And
I think we talked about the points that were really important to us and enough to get somebody interested in reading the book.
You should. It's on Audible. It's called Uncultured. It's a very interesting read.
I did like it, and I do appreciate you bringing it to my attention.
Forcing you to read it.
I didn't even read it. I bought the book, but I listened to the audiobook.
Audible is the best.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. It's a great comeback episode. Thank you for doing this. And I hope everybody enjoys listening.
And if you have any comments, you should comment.
Absolutely. All right.
Bye.